Welcome to the Cyber Talks Securing Federal Frontiers podcast, sponsored by Presidio Federal and VMware, where we delve into the dynamic realm of cybersecurity. In the past year, federal agencies, as highlighted by the Government Accountability Office, have made strides in addressing cyber threats. However, the journey towards fortifying our digital defenses is far from over. As the landscape of cyber threats continue to evolve, so must federal agencies' strategies. Enter today's spotlight on Zero Trust architecture, a paradigm that champions the ethos of never trust, always verify. In this episode, we're privileged to be joined by Jeff Colburn, Solutions Architect at Presidio Federal, an expert in the field of unraveling the intricacies of Zero Trust and its profound impact on the ever-changing cyber terrain. Tune in as we explore the proactive mitigation of cyber threats and navigate the transformative landscape shaped by the principles of Zero Trust. Welcome, Jeff. Thank you for joining us today.
No problem. Pleasure to be here.
Well, excellent. So let's go ahead and jump into the first question, Jeff. Can you provide me a brief overview of what Zero Trust architecture is and why it has become a crucial paradigm in cybersecurity?
Oh, absolutely. So Zero Trust is a security framework. CISA defines 5 pillars. DISA defines 7 pillars for this framework. However, they both focus upon identity, device, network, application, and data. And they introduce principles such as identity verification, least privilege, microsegmentation, monitoring, and dynamic policies. And since there's been such a major shift in IT landscape due to agencies' increased use of cloud services, mobile devices, and remote work, the security approach has to evolve from securing the network to securing the data. Now trust has to be established, has to be enforced, and it has to be continuously verified.
That's great. Now, can you tell me, how does the never trust, always verify ethos of Zero Trust impact the way federal agencies approach their IT security?
So the never trust, always verify, that requires a departure from the traditional security approach. No longer can you consider everything inside the network to be trusted. So Zero Trust operates on the assumption of compromise. So agencies, they have to become more identity centric. And that means users have to be authenticated before they're granted. That's including internal assets. They must think in terms of least privilege, and they can only grant the minimum level of access required to perform specific tasks. And this is not just for users, this is also for application and processes. You can no longer just grant root access to everybody or to an application or a process. Agencies' networks can no longer be flat and open. So once you're inside, traditionally that's how it was, but now you have to think of segmenting your network into more smaller and isolated zones. And this is going to reduce the lateral movement of potential attackers.
Let's talk about some of the key intricacies of implementing Zero Trust and how does it differ from traditional security models?
Well, with Zero Trust, there's some key shifts from the traditional model. Previously, security architecture focused on securing the network perimeter, and the internal network was relatively flat and open. Once somebody was inside, they could pretty much move freely throughout the network. Zero Trust now focuses more on securing data. User identification is required before granting access. Least privilege is going to grant the minimum access required, for certain tasks. And the network is segmented into those smaller isolated zones. So if somebody in engineering, now they can no longer get to finance, or finance can't get into engineering, because now you have these security zones within the network. And then you have continuous monitoring, and it provides real-time responses to anomalies and suspicious behavior. So rather than just reacting to things that may show up in your log, now you have policies and appliances that are able to provide more real-time response. And then again, speaking of dynamic policies, now they're able to adapt to changes to the threat landscape. No longer are they static and have to be manually modified.
It's great. Thanks. Can you share some examples of how Zero Trust architecture proactively mitigates cyber threats within federal agencies?
Oh, absolutely. So I'll give you a few examples. So the implementation of multi-factor authentication. This, previously usually was single factor, which was password. Now you have multi-factor, so it's usually something and something you have. And in implementing multi-factor, now ensures that person has those proper credentials, both something they know and something they have, before they have access to sensitive data. Another example is implementation of least privilege. Previously, applications or processes might just be granted root access, and that's no longer the case. Now, they're granted access to the level required for them to perform their task. And this is going to reduce the risk of unauthorized access. And then with microsegmentation technologies, they continue to evolve, and now they permit network zones and even end devices divided up into security zones. And that, again, that's going to limit that lateral movement of potential attackers.
And our final question, Jeff, in what ways has the cyber terrain evolved, and how does Zero Trust adapt to these changes?
Sure. So there's a few ways the cyber terrain has evolved. First, the increased complexity to the IT environment. As agencies continue to incorporate cloud services, mobile devices, remote workers, and IoT. So rather than attempting to implement a static security perimeter, Zero Trust focuses on securing the data. And it also provides a more dynamic security posture that's better suited to adapt to that changing landscape. The other is security threats have become more sophisticated. So in order to mitigate these threats, Zero Trust operates on the assumption of compromise, meaning we're aware of threats and there's an assumption that there's a threat already inside the perimeter. So it's continuously monitoring to quickly detect and respond to those threats. And the policies are more dynamic to reduce the impact of any security incident. And then third, there's an increased awareness of insider threats. That's either intentional or unintentional. So Zero Trust addressed that risk of insider threats using identity verification, least privilege, and microsegmentation.
That's great. And before we wrap up, Jeff, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share with our audience today?
So really, when you think Zero Trust, it's not a product, it's not an application. It's a mindset. It's how you approach security. And there's certain frameworks defined to get you into that mindset, into the things you have to be thinking about. So no longer is it about building a perimeter and assuming everything inside is secure. Now it's the threat is inside and outside. So how do we protect the assets within our networks? And what is those approaches that can be implemented? And once you have that mindset, then you can start thinking of the technologies that will fulfill or meet those security requirements.
Closing out another insightful episode of Cyber Talks, Securing Federal Frontiers. We want to take this time to extend our appreciation to our audience and our sponsors, Presidio Federal and VMware. The journey through the dynamic realm of cybersecurity continues, and we hope today's conversation has left you with valuable insights. If you haven't already, be sure to tune into our next episode and visit presidiofederal.com/partners/VMware to learn more.